All right, so welcome everyone to the first in what I hope is a series of panel interviews with established coaches, teachers, facilitators in the world that are doing good and not killing themselves in the process. And I was really excited that I know a lot of people who've done excellent internal training, and many of us are now wanting to offer our gifts to the world. And that's another type of journey and skill set that you don't necessarily learn through hours of meditation or even coaching practice or circling practice. Yeah, so originally I was going to do breakouts to start, but since there's a nice intimate crew, I think we're just going to dive right in. So I'll introduce our speaker today is Cam Joyner. I've known Cam for since 2016.
2016, yep.
Yeah. So we met at Maple and we helped run the place for a few years and could always commiserate and envision in the car rides to the gym and back about what are we doing and how the hell are we going to do this and why do we sign up for this and isn't this so amazing? And oh my God, this is terrible. And he left back in 2019. And a lot of the time when we were together, we talked a lot about building up the business side of Maple and learning about copywriting and sales funnels and advertising and just trying to figure this out. And then he left in 2019 and kind of had your own little journey. And now, as my understanding is like a successful coach and pay all your expenses and work a few hours a week and kind of just figure it out through brute effort, like how to make this work. And we had a lot of nice chats where I just pester you with questions and try to learn slyly what I can from you. I wonder if you could share maybe like a, I don't know, like a 5, 10 minute version maybe about your background, anything I missed, or where you came from and how you got here.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I was born in Columbus, Ohio. I went to school in Arizona. I moved back to Ohio after before completing college, but at the end of 4 years when my father got sick and passed away to help run a family business, which was actually sort of the beginning of a change in my life that I didn't really see coming. So I, at that point, was a pretty staunch atheist. I was a pretty genuinely miserable person, I would say. I had good friends, but I was kind of a an angry, shut off, emotional, kind of drunkard. And then the dealing with my father's death sort of opened up a whole lot of layers of emotion in my life that led to kind of me ending up where I am now. But there's sort of another piece that really brought me to the point that I'm at, which is that about, man, at this point, I guess it's about 12 years ago, I started experiencing sexual dysfunction. So I couldn't get hard, which as a guy is a pretty painful thing. It took a while for me to even acknowledge that there was a problem, but then I started to realize there was a problem and I looked at the typical avenues that exist, which at that point were basically, if you go to a urologist or you go to a doctor and they're going to give you pills like Cialis or Viagra, or there's a pretty brutal implant where they basically rip out the innards of your genitals and put in a pump and sort of saline bags. And so I knew neither of those options were very good options because the pills have detrimental effects, like long term, they stop working for most guys. And then I didn't want to go through brutal surgery. So I started looking for other ways. I had absolutely no idea what to do, but I did realize that I was going to need money. And so I took a contracting job in Afghanistan, making quite a bit of money. I think in hindsight, there was a part of me that was kind of hoping that I might not live because I was pretty depressed. I was struggling a lot, and I had some, Afghanistan's not a very fun place to be, even if you're a contractor. But I came back, and at the very end of my trip there, I was trying to get one of my close friends, Josh, to go on a trip to Japan with me because I just wanted to go visit Japan. And he sort of sent me on a different path. He sent me a link to an ayahuasca retreat center in Iquitos, Peru. And I saw what it was. I saw that you could hallucinate legally in the jungle. And I was just like, oh, this is going to be a great story. And I booked without knowing anything about it. And then I told him that I booked, and he was like, "What? What do you mean you booked?" And he was like, he's like, you should learn about what this is. It's medicine. This is not just to go take drugs and have fun. And I was like, it's going to be fine. And I think at some point, like in hindsight, there was a point in me that sort of hoped that this was something bigger, but my frame of mind just didn't really fit that at the time. And so he ended up going with me. He was dealing with really bad anxiety. And I went down there, and, the first night I just had this experience where it was exactly what I expected. I was just having fun and, really enjoyable. All these people around me were like puking and having a really rough time. But then the second night, it started to get into some like really deep childhood wounds. And I had this moment where I let go of like some feelings that I'd had towards my mother. I had a complicated relationship with my mother, she herself had a pretty complicated relationship with her mother. And I just had this moment where I realized how much I love my mother. And it was the first time in my adult life where I ever actually felt happy. It's the first moment where I realized that I hadn't been happy for most of my life. And it was the first time in my life where I remember feeling an emotion other than anger. And so that event paired very closely with a really clear understanding of the fact that my sexual dysfunction was emotional in nature. I don't know why it was so clear there, but I spent a lot of time going in and out of Peru and deciding whether or not to pursue shamanism. And I had a very good mentor who was guiding me through the process. And then I'd also heard a lot about meditation, and I'd done a decent amount of meditation, but not at a serious level. So I decided while I was back in the States to go sit a Vipassana retreat. And in the Vipassana retreat, it became really clear that there was some serious trauma going on in my body, just like serious tension, and that the retreat relaxed a lot of it. And so I could feel my body very clearly in ways that I never had before. Like I could feel pieces of my throat that had always been really tight, and they would release. It was very uncomfortable at first, but I could feel myself breathing like all the way into my chest, which is not a normal experience for me. I could experience like what it was actually like to sit in my legs and my body. And I also experienced states that were very similar to what I'd experienced with ayahuasca. So it became really clear to me that both of these paths had something profound in them. But when I really thought about the direction of my life, I didn't really want to spend the next, 10 years or so puking my guts out in the Amazon jungle. And I also at that point was already pretty clear that whatever I did, I wanted to use these things to help people. And I realized how expensive ayahuasca was, and how inaccessible it was compared to being able to just sit and meditate. So I made the decision in 2016, at the early part of that I was going to go live at a monastery. And I was looking at several monasteries in China. I was a little less interested in Japan. There was also one. I was looking at Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in Europe. And then my sister saw a Facebook ad for Maple. And I believe, if I remember correctly, you were the spearhead of the Facebook ads.
Success.
So I think, if I also remember correctly, that you only got one resident out of it. And I believe that was me.
It was worth it. There you go.
No. So I went to the monastery and started dealing with some of the other internal things. This is sort of a thumbnail sketch of the full journey. There's a lot of, ins and outs of it. But, the thing, being at the monastery forced me to start dealing with some of those, really painful emotional pieces of my life, dealing with, ways that I really wronged other people, that I had justified and talked about internally to myself. I'd come up with excuses of why things weren't my fault and didn't really think about how I was still affecting myself. I spent, time just really watching my mind, and over time I started to see the actual like cause and effect process between how I was thinking and how I was creating the sexual dysfunction, and how I was using that sexual dysfunction as a way to avoid other problems that were existing within relationships for me. And so in 2000, and I think late 2017, I went on the first date that I'd been on in something like 5 years. And I dated someone for a few months, and then, my sexual dysfunction, I started testing some of the theories that I'd had about what was going on, and it started to alleviate some. And the woman that I was seeing she was very lovely. She was very sweet, but she was really hoping that I would leave the monastery and go move up to northern Vermont and live a quiet life with her. And, I didn't feel the same level of connection with her. And so we parted ways. And then about 6 months later, I met Jeannie, who is now my wife, and I got sort of the final pieces of the puzzle of how my sexual dysfunction was being created, just sort of fell perfectly into place with her. And so, I was able to heal myself. And then after leaving the monastery, I wasn't really clear about what I was going to do. I don't know if any of you have met Dane, but Dane he's an entrepreneur who teaches other people how to be entrepreneurs, had, I would say, magnified the entrepreneurial spirit that already existed inside of me, along with you, Mitra. Mitra and I talked a lot about business in the time we were there. And so I knew I wanted to start a business, but I thought I was going to help like yoga studios get customers or something.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I started, putting together plans to do that. I started calling yoga studios. And then at some point, my wife, being the incredibly wise woman, especially who sees my blind spots, was like, why don't you help guys with sexual dysfunction? Especially because it was something I was already really passionate about. So I don't know how many of you are aware of this particular stat, but it's a pretty staggering one. The American Urological Association estimates that there's 30 million men in the United States that have ED. So erectile dysfunction basically means that you can't get an erection hard enough for penetration. And if you do some basic statistics and you take people out who are significantly younger than sexual age or significantly older than sexual age, you come up with a statistic that's about 1 in 3 guys. So 1 in 3 men have some form of this problem. It varies in severity quite a bit, and then the worldwide numbers are just a whole other staggering thing. I've seen numbers that range from 700 million up to 1.5 billion. And so, it's interesting right now that there's a point where, male loneliness and male issues are starting to become more prominent in in our society. And, I knew about a lot of those kind of before, many years ago, from just having been on this, been on this journey, talking to men and learning about it. Because once I started realizing that I had it, and I actually started opening up about it quite a bit. Like I think I probably told you, Park, relatively early in our journey together, and I was pretty honest about the effects of it. When I went to the monastery, I was suicidal. I was pretty clear that I was either going to figure out how to get past this, or I was probably going to end my life. That's the severity that I was at, because it was just, it takes, it makes you feel like you're not a man. And, dealing with that pain, I didn't have any of the coping skills that were necessary. I didn't really understand how my mind was doing it. And at that point, emotions were still pretty new to me. So I didn't really even know how to feel emotions or deal with them, or be angry without throwing at a person, feel sad without, being overwhelmed by it. And realistically, at that point, I'd only been relatively sober for a couple of years. So I was still pretty new to just the whole thing. So my wife was right. So I made a post on Reddit. I didn't know if I was actually capable of helping anyone. I didn't understand what my level of understanding of the problem was. So I made a Reddit post, and I basically told men, here's what happened to me. I don't know if I can help you. I'm looking for about 5 guys to try and help for free. Just may not work. If it doesn't, I'm sorry to have wasted your time. If it does work, just send me a message. From that original post, I got 3 guys. And interestingly enough, 3 of those 3 guys, 2 of them were virgins. They'd never had sex. And neither of them had really even attempted sex, but they were running into sexual problems that were, even within masturbation. And they, were both kind of scared to even attempt. And then there was a 3rd guy who was somebody who was in his mid-20s, and he was, pretty good looking guy, had a really, really happy life aside from this problem. And so the 2 guys that were virgins, I worked with both of them for over a year, and neither of them even attempted to have sex. And those 2 guys made me very, very close to quitting and thinking that I didn't have the ability to help people. But the 3rd guy was honestly a blessing for me, because I was able to very clearly see what was happening with him, and I helped him very, very quickly. And in the course of about 2 months, he went from not being able to get an erection on his own or with a woman, having no confidence with women, to being able to basically, he fell in love with the woman of his dreams, and as far as I know, they're still together. They have a great sex life, and I haven't heard from him, in many years.
Can I
So
pause you real quick?
yeah.
What's like the engagement look like, or what's the how do you actually heal the problem? What's the is there
Uh,
like a standard toolkit or
I mean, the only toolkit that I really know of is one that I've made. I'm sure there probably are better tools, but basically, there's two real separate ways that I sort of help people with it. One of them is that a lot of the ways that men think about sex and the way that they think about relationship came from either porn or came from just a society that's obsessed with sex. So men
Hmm.
oftentimes misvalue the importance of sex, which puts a lot of pressure on themselves. So if you're a man and you have the idea or any set of ideas that sort of come from this, that if you cannot make your partner come, like the best orgasm ever, then they're going to leave you, which is a nearly universal belief with guys with ED, and I would
Hmm.
say it's pretty prominent in America, even with guys that don't have that problem. That then you're basically, what you're doing is you're adding a bunch of pressure on a simple thing like getting an erection, and erections are part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the one that's, it's responsible for basically rest and digest. It's a relaxation response.
Hmm.
So basically, the worst thing that you can do to try and have sex is to have pressure or anxiety.
Hmm.
So basically, what I typically do with men is I sit down and I just talk to them. I ask them questions about sex and how they view sex, and what's bothering them about sex, and they just talk to me about what they're afraid of. And then I try and help them separate between fears that are real versus fears that are not
Hmm.
real. Some guys who are in a relationship, if they don't get an erection soon, their partner really will leave them. And some guys, that's just a fear and it's not in any way based in reality. So it's always
Hmm.
good to figure out which of those is actually happening. Most of the time, it's fears that aren't real. And so I basically help them come to I talk to them and break the fears down analytically to show them ways that it's not necessarily true. And then I also try and emotionally prepare them to test it, because you always have to know, like, one of the best things that I've found as an antidote for a fear is the truth. And so finding out what the truth is, if you think your partner is going to leave you if you don't get an erection, and you've lost your erection consistently for 4 years and your partner's still with you, you have a lot of counter evidence to that problem. And the other really interesting thing about it is that guys tend to, because they're afraid that their losing an erection will cause their relationship to come to an end. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to acknowledge that it's even happening. And in my experience, the thing that actually tends to cause relationships to come to an end is that their partner will make assumptions about why they're not getting hard. Since they're not getting any information about why, it'll trigger all their partner's fears. And then the thing that ends up causing their relationship is lack of communication. So I also always try to help them communicate with their partner what's going on and what they need in order to sort of feel more safe. And
Hmm.
then from there, it just honestly becomes very practical. There's a lot of little things that happen in sex, little details where little things matter, little things contribute. And once you sort of calm the emotional side down, then you can look at
Hmm.
the practical pieces.
Hmm. What's one example of like a practical small detail?
Most guys don't, they remove stimulation while they're putting a condom on,
Hmm.
and then they're not very good at putting a condom on. So while they're putting the condom on, they lose their erection
Hmm.
and they think that that's ED. And all that
Got it.
really needs to happen is recognizing I lost the erection because I removed stimulation.
Hmm.
And then I did something where, they may get up and walk across the room to get a condom, which your body isn't designed to really walk with erections.
Hmm.
So a lot of times there's really practical things where once you realize that's what's happening and you change how you address them, it becomes a
Interesting.
lot easier to fix.
Interesting. Cool. And you figured this all out just kind of on your own, working with your partner and trial and error?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of things that I figured out just from that. I'm not a guy who uses a lot of condoms, so some of those pieces have come from working with clients, but
Hmm.
I understood arousal enough to understood things like, I saw that one, like is a very mysterious problem in that whatever's happening, I tend to get people in groups. So I'll get 4 or 5 clients at a time, and at least 3 of them will have a problem that's similar. So at the beginning, I got a bunch of guys who are having issues with condoms. And so I just learned how to work through that. And then, it's just interesting how they kind of come in batches. So, I would say probably 60 or 70% of what I learned came directly from my own experience. And then there's a whole lot of problems that other guys have dealt with that I never had to deal with like that.
I want to switch more towards like the coaching journey, but I guess one last question would be like if you knew if a guy that had ED was listening, like what's the one tip or like what's the advice you would give them?
Don't make it such a big deal. It's a much smaller problem than you think it is. Making it a big deal is really what's creating the problem.
Cool. Cool. Nice. So what happened from that original like Reddit 3 guys, one guy is actually on top of things, and then what was the next step from there?
When I first started doing it, I was working because I had to pay bills. My wife was in medical school during the time, and so I got a job selling insurance. And so when I thought about how many men actually have ED, my initial plan was actually to not charge. I was actually going to do this entirely as a service. So it was free to talk to me. I put up a website. It was free to talk to me. I just started making YouTube videos about the problem, and guys started coming to my website. And then, so you just had to fill out a small application, just talking a little bit about what was going on. And then, I would set up these meetings, and I had a really, really low percentage of people that would show up. So I just started wasting a lot of my time, and I started getting frustrated. And then I had 2 different people in my life who are business savvy kind of people were like, you got to charge. And so I went from charging nothing to charging $30 to meet with me. And the show up rate was still pretty low. And then one of them was basically like, he gave me some tough love and was basically like, in anything in business, you have to charge in relation to the painfulness of the problem, or something that at least matches what's in the person's mind about the worth of what it is. And I didn't really understand what he was talking about. He gave me a great example. He said, okay, if you went on like autotrader.com, it's just a website that sells cars, and you saw, basically like a 2023 Porsche 911 for sale for $29, is there any part of you that would believe that would be real?
Right.
And I said, no. And he said, okay, how big is the industry that caters to ED? And I looked it up, and it was somewhere around, I believe Pfizer that year made like $3 billion on ED drugs alone. And so I said, okay, how much do you think I should charge? And he said, you should charge $2,000 a month. And I was like shocked. And I didn't listen to him initially, but I got to the point where I was frustrated with people paying me $29 and then not even showing up for a call. And so I had another friend send me a website called consulting.com, which is a guy, his name is Sam Ovens, I think. And his business model is basically about helping people start single person coaching businesses. So I went on and bought his course when it was on sale. And ironically enough, the same exact number of what he recommended, the exact same number as the person in my life who had been kind of giving me some good advice. He said, you shouldn't charge less than $2,000 a month. So, from there, I went on and decided, okay, let me just see if anybody would even pay that. And so I met with a bunch of people. I was very clear with myself. I said, I'm going to talk to 20 people. If I talk to 20 people and no one is interested, then I'm going to try and find a completely different pricing model. And the first guy I talked to was like, would you do 1,500? And I was like, yeah, I think I can do 1,500. And so I realized that what I had was a lot more valuable than I thought.
Yeah. Well, how are you getting these? How are you getting these people? They have referrals or more Reddit posts or?
No. So I abandoned. There's kind of a whole other story with Reddit. So I originally started. Well, there was originally an erectile dysfunction community on Reddit, and I
Hmm.
was just giving free advice on there, and somebody got annoyed and they banned me. I
Oh,
wasn't charging it. This was before I was charging, and so I started my own Reddit community, and then I gave up on it after probably about 6 months of that because people were asking me the same questions over and over and over and over and over again, and I got tired of answering them, and so I started a YouTube channel, and originally I just started posting YouTube videos to people to answer people's questions, and then YouTube is what started bringing people to my website. So nearly everybody, at the beginning of when I was charging came from YouTube. Occasionally, I get people from Reddit. I still get people trickle in from Reddit, but usually they find me on Reddit, then they go follow my YouTube channel, and then I would say a very high percentage of guys who end up doing coaching will tell me that they've literally watched every video I've ever made.
oh wow.
Yeah.
How many videos roughly did you make?
I can tell you, I would guess around 30 to 40, somewhere around there.
These are like
Um,
5, 10 minute videos, or
yeah, I would say that my shortest one is 3 minutes. My longest one is like 22. I would say they probably average around 10 to 12 minutes.
gotcha.
Um, so I saw a question here. Do you want me to field that or do you want me
I
to?
guess I can ask you here. Did you experience any self-doubt about the pricing? And if so, how did you work through that block of I'm not worth it, or how could I charge this amount?
That's a great question. So I had, of course, like charging $2,000 a month for coaching seemed absurd and on one level, but I personally spent well over $100,000 trying to fix the problem.
Wow.
So I understood that people would pay,
Right.
but when it comes down to asking somebody for $2,000 a month,
Hmm.
it it was extremely uncomfortable. Even being able to tell people that I would like my first calls were really bad. I would like justify and like, well, here's the reason why, and like,
Right.
it was terrible.
Right.
But the thing that I'm in kind of I would say in kind of a unique business position in that the content that I make on YouTube, by the time people get to me, they've watched um typically like hours and hours and hours of me talking about this problem in a way that, as far as I know, no one else talks about it. There's definitely videos on
Hmm.
YouTube about erectile dysfunction, but not many people go into the detail I go into. Not many people are focusing on like the different aspects of your mind and how it's created. And
Right.
so usually by the time somebody gets to me, they trust me a lot. And like
Right.
my sales skills to this day are not great. It's but it doesn't require it because I think people, I mean, it's important to learn. I'm improving. I'm much better than I used to be. But at the end of the day, the thing that's happened by the time someone gets on a call with me is they already trust that I know what I'm talking about, which in
Right.
business carries so much weight.
Right. Right.
I've never had somebody not believe that I had ED. You can't watch my videos and think that I faked that.
Hmm.
And there's also not a lot of other options out there for men. So the ones who would get drawn into me are they're usually they would sign up. Usually if they can afford it and they get on a call with me, they're going to sign up.
Right. Yeah, I have a similar question actually that I think we've talked about in the past, and I've been experiencing in the past few months, which is more like being an entrepreneurial person and a coach, there's like these ups and downs of like, oh my God, I got a new client. And then this person suddenly doesn't want to do it anymore, won't say why, or like this person ghosted and they seem so interested. And like, have you learned to like navigate that, or like how do you work with it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, this has kind of been the shorter version, but there were several instances where I was still trying to look at like ways to make things cheaper. One thing I'll say is that if you want those kind of doubts to go away, um, charging more will make those go away because people are less likely to not show up. I had a client that I'm trying to think of. I've had a couple clients ghost me. One of them was in Saudi Arabia,
Hmm.
and he was sort of, in Saudi Arabia, they're not really okay with premarital sex. And so I don't know exactly what happened, but there were some things that sort of happened leading up to that that led me to believe he might have gotten in trouble for having sex. And then I had another guy who I didn't hear from him for like a couple weeks, and I was like really upset about it. And it turned out that his aunt had died, and his aunt was basically like his mother. So he was like, you know what? It just didn't even occur to me. And like as soon as he told me that, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, and it was fine. But like it made me a wreck for a couple weeks, and like you know, I've been in a pretty unique position, I think, in that I've been very successful in the sense of the people that I work with get better, with the exception of those two gentlemen that I work with that never actually attempted to have sex, which I learned later on that like you have to like having sex is a very important part of healing this particular problem. You can't avoid the thing that gives you the information that you need to fix the problem. So I don't work with people who haven't had sex before.
Just like read books and like meditate on my own and just
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It turns out you have to face your problem, but you know I've had very very good results with pretty much everyone that I've worked with. I mean, there's people who've gotten a little better, and they're usually very clear why. Like there's one particular situation I can think of where a guy, I would say it probably got about 60 or 70% better, but there was a very specific thing I repeatedly was asking him to do, and he understood it would help, but it meant sacrificing a relationship that he wasn't willing to give up on. And I understood that, you know, it's like we both know this will help, and if that cost is too big for you, I totally understand. And so yeah, I think on one hand, like charge enough to make sure that you don't run into people, you know, if you I think one of the problems that people that go through, you know, the monastic kind of life come out with is that they have this idea that I want to help people. And a lot of the problems that I think lead people to deal with, you know, the concerns or the, you know, is coaching kind of worth it, is they run into people who are very vocal about the fact that they want to get better, but they're not actually willing to put an effort to get better. And the reason that you charge is because it weeds those people out. My wife and I have been through a couple of instances together where we put in a lot of effort to help people that at the end of the day just didn't actually want the help. Like they were willing to live with the problem in their life, but they spent a lot of time and emotion complaining about it and talking about how much help, how they just need help and then get through it. And in both of those instances, we were not charging anything. And in both of those instances, it wasted a lot of our time and caused a lot of heartache for both of us, because when you're helping people, you care about them. And so, you know, there's not, you know, I'm not a person who, when people that I'm coaching, you know, if they lose, I feel like I lose. Especially if it's something that, if it's advice that I've given that didn't work out the way I want. So like, I put a lot of pride on trying to give really good advice. But the charging thing weeds those people out. And there's other ways to do it as well. But like, you're part of the skill of becoming a coach is learning how to get rid of the people who are going to be problematic and not actually get better, and find your people who are going to get better and really want what you have. And there's no shortcut for it, but charging helps.
You do like, so that's actually one of my other questions, which I think you're answering, like pricing is a huge filter, but do you have like an application, or do you have certain filters that you know, like, oh, this is not going to be a good fit for me? Or
yeah, I mean, so pricing is definitely one. I do ask people to fill out an application. Filling out an application on its own filters out a lot of people. People who are willing to put in absolutely zero effort won't fill out an application. So that's helpful. But my favorite one is that on one of my questions is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready are you to overcome this problem? And I don't have a drop down box, so they can type in their answer. And if they put 11 or anything above 11, I've never had a single person show up for the call.
Oh.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how ready are you to make a change, with 10 being absolutely?
Yes. And if they put 11, they don't show up.
That's so strange. Okay.
Yeah. And the best clients always put 9.
Huh. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good one. I'm gonna save that.
No.
We've talked about this in the past because, like, you've told me many times, you should solve a very specific pain point. And I know a lot of the coaches that I know that are starting off are kind of more like, we do intro calls that are free, and then we're just sort of like, we'll solve all of your problems, whatever comes up. And it sounds like you don't do that. You're like, we do. You have a package, and you're solving a very specific problem. And once that's solved, you guys are like done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, okay. My view on this, and I know it goes counter to what a lot of people that are getting into coaching do, but you are not a jack of all trades. I don't think I think it's irresponsible to take someone's money and try to solve a problem that you don't understand. I've been thinking about ED for 12 years. Every day of my life for the last 12 years, I've been thinking about this problem. And because of that, I understand the nuances of it. So that's one piece of it. You know, I don't think that's the only approach. I think that you can be a coach and you can solve a few different problems. I think that's totally reasonable, but I think the idea that, oh, I can help you with anything is it's to me, it's hard for me to imagine how that would be possible. I'm also understand that I don't have other people's experience. Maybe other people have better knowledge or understanding or something of that than I do. And I also think that when I look at businesses that are successful, genuinely speaking, they're providing a very specific feeling. And when you're trying to solve general problems, most of the time people don't have a strong emotional connection to it. So at the beginning of my my journey as a coach, I had a really, really low percentage of people who would go to my website that would do anything. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason is because I would give intellectual information. Mm-hmm. And so the thing that I've really been shifting towards and getting into is, you know, I got really into copywriting. I'm not the best copywriter. If you go to my website, it's not the best copy, but and especially right now, it's actually hilarious. My coaching page is really, really bad copywriting, and I'm aware of that. But the thing that has kind of saved me is that my videos create very specific emotions, and people get on my email list, and my emails tend to create very specific emotions. People do not make any decision that relates to purchasing or solving a problem based on their intellect. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have the intellectual information. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't give valid information. Information can help people feel safe, but the thing that takes a customer from or somebody from being just a person who sees your stuff to being a customer is that you have to trigger an emotion that typically makes them either feel like you understand their problem or makes them believe that they can overcome their problem. And it's just hard for me to imagine being able to put up a coaching page that's going to hit people with non-specific problems. You know, I'm sure there probably are coaches out there that are doing it and that are you know, much more successful than me. It's just hard for me to imagine that.
Totally. If you had to start over now, do you think like you'll just go straight to like making YouTube videos? And like, is that still a thing that you think would work today if you were starting like today?
I personally think YouTube is the most useful platform for something like what I do. Because, you know, the popular ones right now, like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, they're all feed based. So, and they require a lot more relevance. So the difference between YouTube and like, I'll just use Instagram, is that when you make an Instagram post, it's very unlikely that 1 week after you make that post, that anyone's going to see it, unless somehow it's getting around on like Twitter or something. Right. The difference with YouTube is that YouTube is a search engine. So specifically for what I do, people are searching for answers to how do I deal with erectile dysfunction. And so they go to YouTube and they search, how do I fix erectile dysfunction naturally? And then they find videos. So the thing, evergreen. Yeah, it's evergreen. It's I've heard it described as real estate. You know, it's like real estate. It's always there. And so, you know, I know that business model doesn't work for every business, but to me, YouTube is like, I'm so thankful for YouTube because it's my entire business is built off of it. I'm in the process of doing some things to expand into other avenues, but you know, for the most part, like you have to utilize search in some way. And whether you're trying to rank on Google or using a different video platform like it's a really nice thing if you're providing answers to a very specific problem, because people will search for how to do that, and then you can provide answers.
What do you think was like the shift from I know for a while you're doing other work to sort of supplement your income, and now you can just rely on coaching if you want. And like what was there like a certain shift or something that changed that led it from like now I can just do this easily and well and comfortably?
That's a complicated answer, or the answer is complicated.
Gotcha.
I would say that part of it is just that I built systems that work. So, it made a difference in my confidence level, and first of all, in my ability to heal people. Like I can more consistently get them to the point that I want them to at a much faster pace. So I have a lot more confidence in my own ability to heal them, which makes it much easier to sell it.
Gotcha.
So some of it is just having the experience of having helped a lot of guys and being able to, when I'm on a call with somebody, understand that, yes, I'm going to help you. And I can say that because I mean it, and I know it's happened because I've seen it happen with other people.
Right.
I would say another piece of it is that, I've been through financial instability. I made a lot of money in Afghanistan, and then I spent a lot of money trying to solve this problem. And I spent years feeling really financially unstable. And I think one of the things that really helped me was, working those jobs helped me feel stable financially, which allowed me to focus on, instead of, it's the same thing with ED. If you go into the bedroom needing to get hard, you're not going to. But like being able to have financial stability between me and my wife, I didn't have to go into every sales call knowing I need to close this person, or I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. It was more of like, if this person's a good fit, we'll work together. But if they're not a good fit, like I'd rather let them go.
Totally. Or like that self-sabotage on one side, that's like not having confidence and like shooting yourself in the foot. And then there's like another failure case of like every sale needs to be good and putting all that pressure.
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed that in life you have to care, but not that much. If you care about something too much, it's actually detrimental to your well-being and also your ability to do that thing. If you're a violinist and you care too much about playing a perfect performance, you're going to tense up and you're going to miss the notes. It's the same thing with sex. It's the same thing with business. You should care about the work that you do, but if you put yourself in a situation where this has to succeed, it's not going to. A business really, it's like a tree. It has to have time to grow. I'm coming up on 200,000 views on YouTube, which is not a lot, but for my niche, I'm very happy with it. And it's been years, in the making of that. I've spent years getting copywriting in place that's good enough that captures a decent percentage of people on my, when they go to my website. And part of that is just listening to how guys describe this and using those words and then recognizing that, okay, I don't have to know how to solve every problem relating to this, but there's certain ones that I really know how to, and then I'll learn on the other ones and I'll be honest about, that. And then, it's just, there's a lot of different pieces to it that sort of bring that. And then I also have to be totally honest, my wife she's a doctor. She's entering, she hasn't at the point where it pays super well, but we both know that phase is coming. So like our confidence around stability is pretty high. So for people who are getting more into coaching, or they really want to take that as an avenue, the thing that I would say is like, don't put pressure on your business. Take practical steps to make sure that your life is stable, and especially financially. And then also have good support systems, because you're not always going to win. You're going to lose a lot before you win.
What do you mean with support systems? Like social support or emotional support or
emotional support?
Yeah.
Definitely emotional support. If you want to go the route of coaching people, you're going to have days where you hate it, and you're going to have days where it just tears you apart. Like this is a really personal problem for me. So I took things really personally, and I had really hard days. I had plenty of days where I wanted to quit. I'd throw temper tantrums and want to quit. And my wife made the rule that I'm not allowed to quit until she agrees that it's time for me to quit, which has been a very good rule. So yeah, I think don't go in with rose-colored glasses. Understand that if you want to actually do this, like there are incredible benefits to doing this kind of work. and also be realistic about the fact that it's not a straight road up. You're going to have challenges. Some days you're not going to like this, and some days you're going to feel really hurt and you're going to feel really upset. And being an entrepreneur is lonely. There's days where even the people closest to you won't understand, and those days are hard. But anything worthwhile you're going to do is going to have that.
Is there anything you do when that happens? Like, do you have like your own little processes, or what do you do when you're like, why the fuck am I doing this? I should just quit. Get a job.
Usually I will take a bath, and then my wife and I will binge watch a season of Survivor.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
There's another question in this chat here. Do you have any advice for a coach who's not yet sure what problem or niche they want to focus on? Any tips for how to hone in on what problem or niche to choose?
Yeah, I would say that one good method, just based on what happened to me, is ask people who you're close to that know you really well. I didn't see the fact that I should help people with ED. It was the most obvious thing in the world, but it wasn't obvious to me. So ask other people in your life who know you. I would say, depending on how you want to go, having something that you really care about, something that you're really passionate about, is a double-edged sword. The more you care about something, the more personal it is, the harder you're going to take the losses. So if there's something that's really personal to you, like you're really, it's a really meaningful cause, that can be really good because it'll drive you through the hard times, but there is, a downside to it. Look at what you're good at, look at what things that you care about, and then research and figure out, are other people having the same problem? Is there anything in this that, people would spend money on? And like, it doesn't have to be the exact thing you're doing. Like, for me to understand that this market existed, I didn't have to look and see if other people were getting coaching for sexual dysfunction. I looked to see if other people were getting, spending money on dealing with it, like Cialis.
Right.
So, your solution can be really different, but you need to see, is that market there?
I'm also curious, this has come up a lot in my own life and also talking to other people. And you've mentioned like you use different courses, and sort of some of it was just sort of like organically getting feedback from the world. But like when you're like a new business person doing something that's been uncharted before, and there's so many possibilities, like, should I do TikTok, or should I focus on email, or should I just go to conferences, or should I do YouTube? Should I get more coaching training? Should I da 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 da? Should I be an influencer? Like, how did you like narrow it down and be like, I'm just going to do like these 2 or 3 things? Or like, how did you know what to pick or how to prioritize?
That's a great question. I I honestly don't remember how I stumbled upon you. Basically, once I figured out that YouTube just behaved differently, I narrowed in that I had to do that was a good way to do it. But doing something that isn't really common, the thing that I really wish I would have understood back then is that whatever your business is, you have to create it. Even you buy a course, there's pieces of it that aren't going to work because, the thing that the coaching.com thing that I bought, it was about helping businesses get customers.
Right.
It's a helping people make money kind of coaching, which a lot of the things that they were talking about didn't fit with me. They were saying, go on, join Facebook groups, make friends with people, using DMs and stuff like that. And there really weren't Facebook groups that I could be a part of. I did some of that on Reddit, but on Reddit, people were not very responsive in a way that people are apparently on Facebook with business stuff. I don't know. I think the thing that I would tell people is like, the process of creating a business, it's the word create is always used when you talk about that. You're literally building something from the ground up. And so to some degree, you get to decide how it works. You can look at, when you're figuring out something like a pricing structure, you can figure out how many hours a week do I want to work with clients. And you can change your pricing based on that. It still has to work. You have to test it and make sure that people are willing to pay your price, but like, you can decide that. You might find for me, I piecemealed a lot of things together. I bought a course on YouTube. I bought a course on coaching. And then I spent a lot of time learning on YouTube. I would also say that like whatever platforms you're most comfortable with, like the ones that you use naturally, you're gonna have a better affinity towards. Like you're gonna understand how to use them better.
Right.
Because if you post a TikTok video or a YouTube video on TikTok, it's gonna bomb.
Right.
Because they're totally different formats,
Right,
and you have to understand your platform. So the other thing that I would say is don't get too bogged down in which is the right thing to do.
Mhm.
I wish I had taken like 800% more action than I did.
Mhm.
And I think that realistically, everything that I did with my business at this point probably could have been done in a year if I wasn't so worried about everything going perfectly.
Totally.
Yeah.
Did you outsource any, or do you outsource now anything like in terms of like video editing, audio, like logos, graphics,
All
website?
of that, everything that you just said is done by my lovely and wonderful wife.
Yeah, of course, yeah, right.
I know how to video edit.
Right.
It's something I'm working on more because as she enters residency, she's going to be a lot busier, but also because
Totally.
the thing that I'm really making a shift right now, and that I'm realizing how much video is an art form, and I was just sort of treating it as doing the least amount possible in order to get the
Right.
message out.
Totally.
So I'm sort of falling in love with the process, but like all that other stuff, I have done by my wife, but I also know that a lot of people, they use Fiverr. And there's a lot of people that they find video editors and like get thumbnails and stuff done by that. And then there's always, there's infinite ways to do things. If you're budget constrained at the beginning, you'll have to do more things yourself. And there's so much information. Like if you want to learn how to make YouTube videos, you can go online on YouTube and learn how to make them. If you want to know how to make TikTok videos, decent, you can go on and learn how to do it. If you want, everything that you want to learn is at the tip of your fingertips. The thing I would say is that focus on what the clear things that you need to do are, and just learn how to do them. You're gonna have to learn a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I'm in the same place, I think, with video too. I'm like learning the art of video editing and shooting rather than just how do you shoot a video in general.
Yeah. Totally. And that it's a process you go through. I am a big fan of jujitsu. I pester Mitra about jujitsu every time he comes over.
Yes.
But it's, and I think this is also something that's true in yoga. I think yoga is probably actually the easiest metaphor. Is like your first day that you ever do yoga, you might learn what the shape of downward facing dog is, but somebody who's been doing it for 20 years understands 100 more details about how to do it. But they didn't get there until they did the first day where they didn't really know how to do it other than make the shape. And so just do things. You'll get better.
Yeah. So I have a bunch of quick questions that you don't need to go into too much detail, but more like nuts and bolts tips kind of thing. Sure. Or your process. Like, how do you book calls? Do you use like Calendly or Zoom meetings or something else?
I use something called Once Hub. It's paired with like Schedule Once Hub. They're all the same thing. And it's just basically an embedded thing that goes on my website.
And do the clients usually do like the same time each week, or is it unique or like dynamic each week?
Yeah, so I try with my coaching clients, I try to keep them at the same time each week. And with them, they don't use that. We usually book on, the only time somebody will use that scheduling stuff is if they buy a one-off call, which is significantly cheaper than coaching, but you can only do one. So they go through and they schedule using that. And I also use that for my I have another business that I run. I'm an astrologer and I teach astrology. So my astrology clients and astrology students use that as well.
Gotcha. And then in general, you're looking for like, are you still doing like 4 or 5 clients at a time, like in terms of the long-term engagements?
Yeah. Typically, I go between 3 and 5 clients at a time. I personally just get burnt out if I do too many. And also, even with that, I typically take them on for 3 months, and most of the time I don't allow them to extend. So they understand that after 3 months, they're going to be on their own, which kind of puts a little bit of pressure on them. And usually after 3 months, I usually want a break. So sometimes I'll take on 1 or something during that break, but I don't like to have them consistently. Yeah.
That's really nice.
It's just, because I also like the other half of the business is creative, like creating content, creating the
Right.
website, I'm currently working on a course to take everything I've learned and put it in. And it takes
Hmm.
a lot of energy to do those things. And so coaching requires a lot of energy too.
Hmm. Are you ever getting like referrals or testimonials from these guys, or they just sort of disappear into the ether?
I get testimonials. For me to get testimonials though, so I have a lot of written testimonials. I've started getting interviews with people, but
Hmm.
they don't do video and they ask me to change their voices. So
Okay, sounds like
I,
FBI kind of
yeah, I have
deep
a
throat.
bunch of them that I haven't put up on the website yet because I have to redo my coaching page. And when I redo it, it'll have a bunch of those up. But
Gotcha.
as for referrals, I've never had a referral.
Hmm.
Guys don't talk about this problem even after it's
Right.
healed. So uh, it's frustrating because statistically, if they just talk to three of their friends, I'd probably have another
Right.
client. But
Right.
yeah,
Huh. Got it. Financial wise, what do you use to like accept payments? Do you do like Stripe or Venmo, website, something else?
I use Access. I only use Stripe. I used PayPal for a while, but PayPal charges more fees than Stripe.
Hmm.
So I would get paid less money for the same amount. And also PayPal has they're extremely client centered. I've never personally run into this, but a friend of mine ran into this with his business where he could provide a service to somebody, then PayPal, they could pay for it, get the service, then tell PayPal
Refunds.
that they didn't receive it, and then they would get
Right.
their money back. And so I just avoid PayPal.
Gotcha.
I also occasionally, because I work with people all over the world, I occasionally use Wise, WYSE,
Hmm.
and that allows people to very, very, very cheaply send money from basically bank account to bank account, even through other currencies. Has a
Hmm.
very, very small
Hmm.
transfer fee compared to like wire transfers or even credit card fees. So
Nice.
yeah.
What about like legal structure? Are you like a sole proprietor, or did you form like an LLC or?
Yeah, I have an LLC, I have a single member LLC. And then I have to make the change into to be taxed as an S Corp, but I
Uh-huh.
haven't gotten around to doing it. It'll probably happen next year.
And do you do all the taxes and like have separate bank accounts and all that, or did you
I
outsource?
have, yeah, my business has its own bank accounts. I never do anything unbusiness related in my business bank accounts.
Right.
My wife is incredible. This
She
business would
does
not exist
everything.
without her, but she also does my taxes
Right.
because she
Right.
loves taxes. She loves
Right.
numbers and yeah.
I feel like the biggest lesson from this interview is going to be you should get a really good spouse that will do everything else.
Well,
But,
can I give a plug about that?
yeah, please.
I don't know how many people on this call are single or how many people who are going to watching this are going to be single, but the single biggest decision that you will make in your life is the person that you spend time with, the
Hmm.
person that you choose if you enter into a long-term relationship. Um, Somebody who's very close to me, who is incredibly talented and smart and funny and has every possible thing going for them, ended up with a partner who is has a pretty bad addiction problem, and their life has been completely destroyed by it.
Hmm.
And I'm the other side of that, where I'm somebody I came into this with a lot of trauma. I've done a lot of work on myself. I spent a lot of time improving myself, but like, you know, I have, a lot of stuff that not everyone has to deal with. And my wife is incredible about it. And I wouldn't have been able to heal as much as I could have without her. I wouldn't have been able to get this business off the ground through the hard times without her like emotional support and the support that she's given and all the hours that she's worked for it. um, if you're single or even if you're not looking for a romantic partner, but you're looking for business partners, like be very, very choosy because the wrong person in this kind of situation can make or break what you're doing.
Totally. 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 Um, I want to start wrapping towards like opening up the space to the whole group, but I wonder,
Mhm.
what's like your future plans? I know we touched on the shaman stuff. I know you have like the whole Tai Chi background, and we've talked about other possibilities. Like, do you want to grow the coaching business, or do you want to pivot to astrology, or do you want to make it passive course, or
So I'll have a course that'll probably be out early next year. So I will be bringing in some more passive income. Yeah, my plan is to continue growing the coaching business. I think that, I'm in a weird space in that the stuff that ED relates to is it really relates a lot more to the deeper issues that men are running into.
Mhm.
as a society. And so part of me really wants to start addressing that, but um, I'm not confident that I want that kind of press yet.
Mhm.
I think men need better role models from people who are genuinely at least moving in the direction of healthier. So at some point, I'm going to cross into that space. I am going to take my YouTube skills and hopefully grow out an astrology channel as well.
Mhm.
But my wife is going to be a psychiatrist, and so one of our longer term goals is to run retreats. We just really want to help people become healthier and um, just live lives that are more in tune with what is required for to be healthy people and to move towards a healthier society. Because right now, I don't think most people are very happy with where things are headed. And the same thing that drew me to Maple is the
Right.
same part of me that feels a responsibility to do something about that.
Totally.
And the more that our finances become stable, the more we start thinking about, what else can we give back? So
Hmm. Cool. And anything you want to plug to end? Your website, YouTube, books, people, anything?
if you have ED, go and look me up on YouTube. No pills, no surgery is the name of the channel, and don't give up. ED is a really painful problem, but just because it's painful doesn't mean it's not fixable. And it's a really beautiful process because you start to learn about parts of yourself that you didn't think were there, or that you'd been ignoring, or that were you thought were something and they turn out to be something completely different. It's a really amazing, beautiful journey, and just don't give up. That's the plug.
Thanks, man. Cool. All right. Thanks for answering all these questions. And I think now, I don't know if anyone's still here since the videos are all off, but I think I want to make it more explicitly open in case anyone wants to share like reflections or questions or anything at all. And then kind of do more freestyle. I still have like a dozen more questions I could ask, but and many new ones came up while we're talking. But I'm more interested in making this a communal experience than a pair experience. Um, yeah. Anyone want to share reflections, questions, including Cameron or myself?
I'll share. Hi. Hi, friends. Hi, Khema and Jared. Oh my gosh. So good to see you. Heart. Um, okay, I'll just say this was really nice. It's such a so I think the thing that I'm coming away with that's so awesome is when Cameron, you were just talking about the number of people who have this problem around the world. So it's like the top of the funnel is like really large. It's like really significant. And also, what I'll say is, so I'm a licensed therapist. I live in DC. My discipline is currently, geographically bound, so I can't see people as a psychotherapist all over the world. But as a coach, you can do that. So obviously, it's a huge difference in terms of like what therapists and coaches can do in the bounds of our license. So yeah, that's just something I'm coming away with. If you think about how big the world is, then I think the advice to niche just makes a ton of sense because we can only work with so many people. So I just kind of appreciated that. I think that was the most impactful thing I heard in a certain way. Yeah, and it's really nice to hear from you. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. It's nice to hear that this has been helpful. Yeah, I think I don't even remember who was the person who pushed this, but there was an idea that's like 1,000 true fans is really all you need. And um, if you're passionate about the thing that you're doing and you have a way to help people, you'll find the right people. It may take some time, it may take some trial and error, but like I the part of the reason it's hard for me to expand into trying to hit, the audience of like most men is just because it feels, it's so, a general experience is really hard to put into words, but a specific experience is very palpable. It's why, same people can watch, a very specific like love romantic story and then a bunch of people cry or feel emotions or whatever because it's a very specific thing. So to me, niching is really, really useful.
Yeah, thank you.
I think this other question came up really early on, which was, would you still do ayahuasca now? Or is that part of your journey like over?
Um, I will probably, well, yes, I will. I personally will probably do it again. I would not advise that most people do it. It's a very, very complicated subject that, especially if you grew up in a Western country, most of what's happening does not fit into your worldview. I think that the way that a lot of places are doing it, because it became a cash cow, it's being done by dangerous people. It's being done in dangerous ways. And I don't think that most people should do it unless it's something where there's very, very clear signs that like this is the right thing to do. And I feel really called to do it.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of potential for harm. There is also a lot of potential for health and healing. It's a really beautiful medicine, but it's not benevolent. And I think that's a really hard thing for people to grasp, especially in the spiritual communities. They have an idea that it's this beautiful, benevolent medicine that's going to heal everything in the world. And it's a tool like anything else. It's a living being, and it can have a beautiful, benevolent side. It can have a very dark side as well. And I don't think most people who are going to do it, it's going to be as helpful as they think.
What's the, because I know you did a lot and it was in a certain period in your life when you had like a different, you were like a different person then. And
Yeah.
so like now what would be the draw, or what's the reason now?
So the main thing that I was working on, the reason that I continued to go into it is because I had been uh, sexually abused when I was very young, and it's it was a very good tool for that particular problem.
Mhm.
And I would say about 90% of that is gone. But there's still things that I'm uncovering that I think it's still there.
Interesting.
And I also, so I was sort of in the position where I was like, I was doing things that people who are training as shamans do. I was doing something called dietas. And a dieta is when you form a relationship with a very specific plant for typically a week or weeks at a time, and you remove most other plants. So you can still have rice, and sometimes you can have farina or yucca, or sometimes you're allowed to eat certain fish. But there's a particular one that I used called Sinango, and I broke a dieta on it. And there's consequences for doing that. And one of them is that I had to make a commitment that I would do another dieta with it. So I've basically committed that I will do that, but it's also clear that that it's something that I probably will. There's still some things that I need to wrap up with that part of my life that aren't totally behind me.
Got it. Interesting. Being all the blank faces. Um, hmm.
I can just give a quick reflection. I really enjoyed what you were speaking about, your presentation and your story. Your journey seems really, I mean, really compelling, and especially I really appreciated the kind of like finding something that you're really passionate about, that you've been passionate about for a long time, that you've spent a lot of time and money and energy doing. And trying to fix, trying to solve, and then creating the niche in that world. It brought to mind some ideas for myself as well. So I'm really glad that you kind of brought that into my awareness. It gives me a lot to think about. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really came out of the cosmology of of the shamanic traditions that I spent time in is that oftentimes the thing that you're sick with, and that doesn't necessarily have to mean literally sick, but like the problems that you deal with in life end up becoming your medicine to other people. And yeah, I think the people who end up being best at solving a problem are the ones who had to solve it for themselves. So yeah, look at your own life. Like what are you struggling with? What have you struggled with in the past? What have you gotten over? And a lot of times you probably underestimate the amount of knowledge that you have on that.
Definitely.
Mitra, I have a question for you.
Yeah, please.
Um, I guess I'm just interested to hear you reflect on like this interview in particular in the context of the larger project that you have in mind with the guild, or just kind of what this interview like sparks for you in terms of yeah, does that question make sense? I'm just curious to kind of hear you reflect on what you heard today. I mean, obviously you already know, Cameron, you guys have talked about a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I hope that prompt makes sense. I'm just kind of curious to hear a reflection from you.
Well, it's interesting because it's related to a question I was just thinking of asking Cam about. A lot of people on the call are kind of like recently departed from Maple in the last year. And so like what's the journey over like 3 or 4 years of leaving, and like how did you pick up the good pieces and let go of the pieces that didn't work? And I think for me, the guild, I'm seeing it as sort of the soil for what's needed. Like a lot of us know Daniel Thorson. He has an amazing podcast, Emerge, that I think covered the space of like who are the thinkers on the edge and the ideas on the edge that are lesser known and are emerging. And I think that space has been well minted and mined by many podcasts and people now. And so the next question is like infrastructure and like what comes after the ideals, which to me is like, how do you get livelihood? How do you build communities? How do you get groups of people working together based off of these ideas or themes? And I have the good fortune of knowing a few people like Cam that are more successful and have done this trek. And I really want, I get inspired talking to them, and I'm like, okay, maybe I can do it. And I really want everyone that's on that journey to also be inspired, just so that I have like friends that we can then do like even cooler projects that you know, it's hard to even imagine now. Like maybe we'll run retreats, or maybe we'll buy houses together or something. I don't know what it'll be, but like the larger issues that Cam mentioned about that, all these downstream negative symptoms in society. Like I'd love to work at more of the root stuff, like kind of like what we did at Maple. But and so I think for me, the guild right now has three aspects. One aspect is like how to help people get to right livelihood, whatever supports or whatever that looks like. And maybe we can progressively interview different coaches and teachers and people that have already done this well, and maybe build like a referral and support network that way. So like if anyone now knows anyone that has ED problems, maybe we'll send them to Cam. And the second aspect is like community. I would love to interview also people that are doing innovative things in like community spaces and creating intentional communities. And then the third one would be also just what I really loved about the monastery was like the deliberate practice and tight trust and feedback loops, and wanting to build a community of like-minded peers so that we actually are, we both have integrity and also really high level of skill. And so I'd like us to not just, you know, coast on network effects or something, but we're actually like are some of the best at what we're trying to do, and what are the deliberate practices and forms to do that. So those are the three I'm holding right now. I'm sure there could be other ones, but that's what I'm interested in.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, friend.
We've talked about this before, Mitra, but I would love to see you have another monastery without the goal of awakening, but with the idea that if you have 10 people that train there full time, in the course of a year or two, you can make 10 much healthier people. And those 10 healthier people can go out and continue your guild. That's what I would love for you.
Totally. Yeah.
Awakening is a tall order, but healthy people, I think, especially in an environment like that, can be created much, much faster and make a much bigger impact than, I don't know. I don't know how many people that went through Maple made it to Awakening. But I imagine if the goal was healthy people, that's a goal that a lot of people can hit.
Yeah, and that's current. That's one of the current projects. Also, the 3 or 4 of the people on the calls are on right now is the Dharma House and creating intentional community where we're oriented around truth and service, and ideally making a network of those and sort of our net incubators for propagating that culture and lifestyle and character. But it's been growing in my mind. Like, I think I could run another residential center maybe in another year or two. So,
Well, I'll just say, one more super helpful thing is like, just Cameron talking about, what you are charging and the fact that so few of us would probably be whatever, few of us may be comfortable charging that. But like if we were all charging that for our work, we'd all have a lot more money and we could get the Dharma House network happening much faster because we could purchase property. So there is just a certain thing about building squad wealth here that I think just talking about charging properly is very significant.
Yeah, that's big for me because I was worried that a lot of people were feeling like, oh, I have to create my own business and that's too much. And so I'll do some traditional role that takes on a lot of debt, and who knows if that ever works. And then if we could all become successful within the year or two, and what are the projects we can build once we're all like financially relatively stable and have a lot of free time. That would be very exciting. Mm. Mm.
Can I bring up something?
Please.
I came in late. Sorry. So yeah, sorry if you like already went over this a bunch, but what is alive in me now is what you said, Cam, about, I would sum it up as failing fast. I really struggle with this part. Like I want to know that everything I do is going to work and is going to be perfect the first time before I do it, which is impossible. And so I just don't do things. So I think it would be helpful to hear you speak more about that part in an encouraging way.
All right, I'll give you 2 different things that I think might be helpful. So the first one is failure. The fear of failure is really prominent in men with sexual dysfunction, which is my bread and butter. And no guy wants to fail. They want to figure out how to fix it before they fail. And almost all the time, the thing that finally helps them get past it is only revealed while they're in a sexual situation that isn't going the way that they want. It's where we literally find the piece of information that is needed to correct what's going on. And so the more that they fight and don't want to go into that situation where they fail, the more they're literally keeping away what they want. Failure is a necessary part of being in any kind of coaching thing. You're going to fail with clients. You're going to fail getting clients. You're going to make a video that you think is going to do great, or a post that's going to do great is going to do terrible. You're going to talk to somebody, they're going to seem like a perfect fit, and then you're going to realize that they lied to you on things and they actually weren't that good of a fit, or they aren't actually nearly as interested in moving forward and taking the steps that needed as much as they made it sound like. And those types of things they're pretty universal, but also you have to experience them and then learn how to deal with them. So like there is like the consequence for failing is a lot more mild than you think. It feels terrible emotionally. It sucks, especially at the beginning, or especially on something where you're like, this is really good and it doesn't go the way that you think it will. But you learn from that. And then other thing that sort of relates to this is there's a documentary that I watched. I think it was a couple years ago. I don't know. It was about the Chinese game of Go, which I don't know if you know what that is. Are you familiar with what that game is? It looks kind of like checkers, but think of it. It's a very, very complicated game, and it is it's think complication of chess, but more complicated. And so somebody started training an AI on how to play Go. And within something like 2 or 3 years, it was able to beat the literal world champion, like the best person who exists on this planet at that game. And the reason it was able to do that is because it failed like 10 million times. It played 10 million games in 2 years. And, everything in life that you want to get good at, you have to be bad at it first. You might be naturally talented at something. Maybe you're just the perfect business person. You go in and you already know how to do it from the beginning. But for 99% of people, you have to start out being bad at it. But it's actually really fun because you get to use your creativity to figure out how to get past problems. And the more that you realize, like, when I fail, all that really means is I got more information and I get to use my creative abilities and my analytical abilities to understand how to move forward. And then when you put something in place where you had all the right information and actually works, it's amazing. It feels so much better than if you've won the first time. This is how it works with business. This is how it works with sex. This is how, I'm a big fan of jujitsu. Jujitsu, you walk in your white belt and you just get tapped over and over and over and over again. In my white belt career, I was a white belt for 2 years. I probably got tapped 300, 400, 500 times. You just have to lose over and over and over again, but you just learn. And anything worth doing in your life is going to be that way. And so you might as well do it for something that's important. If coaching is something that you want to do, or business, or helping people with whatever, fail quickly, fail as fast as you can, and don't treat it as failure. It's literally all you're getting is more information. You have more information when you do something and it doesn't work the way that you think it will. And this is straight out of Buddhism. It's cause and effect. You have something, you think this cause will create this effect. If it doesn't, you've learned something. And then you just have to look, okay, well, what do I have to do to get the effect I want? It's really fun. If you look at the world through manifestation, it's literally the process of just creating the thing that you want. And every time something doesn't go your way, it just means that you have to create something different. And it's honestly amazing. It's what makes me enjoy life is failing and learning. And then, to me, that's how life becomes fun. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that was maybe the most inspiring thing I've heard in a long time. I feel like I need to clip that out and listen to it every day, because it's not just true for coaching, as you say it. Like, as you were speaking, I was like, yeah, this applies to how I orient to practice too, and
Yeah,
everything. Yeah, thank you so much.
you're welcome.
I'm sitting with this question or curiosity, like, do you think you're able to charge so much and be so successful because the problem you specifically chose doesn't seem like there's that much competition, but there is like high pain in that area, versus like if you did astrology or something else, like, do you think you could make it as successful doing a different like problem space?
I think the problem space that I have is unique in that it is a very painful problem, and I don't think I have much competition. So I think that is very true. But I wouldn't, my astrology. I studied astrology with a fantastic gentleman who's like, I have a really nice astrology lineage. My grand teacher was the head of the Astrological Lodge of London. So I've learned real astrology from real people that are very good at it. And I didn't practice as a traditional astrologer. If I didn't do the ED work that I do, I would basically do a similar model where I would take astrology, find a different painful problem, and use astrology to solve it, because that's what I already do. So I haven't really mentioned it, but I use astrology in my practice with these men to help solve the problem. And so I think the question you're really getting at is, okay, well, your problem that you have is very unique and painful. what about other people who don't have something like that? And what I would say is use the tools that you have in a creative way. Most astrologers follow the same exact blueprint in that they write books. The traditional path was you write books, which helps you become famous, and then you grow your astrology practice that way. Then the more modern version is you put Instagram posts up, and those Instagram posts, eventually get enough following, and then people go that way. For me, that way didn't work. It's not something I wanted to do because astrology is not an art that, at least in the way that I learned it, where making posts all the time is actually useful. People make really big deals out of this full moon is going to be life-changing for you. And in actuality, most people's lives are not going to change at all. And so it felt inauthentic. But for me, I realized that I was going to use astrology in a way where I was going to help people go much deeper into their lives. And, everybody who's been through Maple has access to some level of insight about the problems that people are dealing with and suffering with. I don't think you can been exposed to Maple and not realize or learned ways that you can help improve other people's lives. I would say find the problems that you can solve that are painful. It doesn't have to be as painful as ED or as deep cutting as ED, but it can be. And then use your skill set creatively and test it. Make sure you actually can solve the problem that you're trying. But that's one of the reasons that courses can be, not that helpful, is if you think this is how a business has to be, chances are you're going to create a worse version of a business that already exists. But if you figure out the things that you're good at, figure out the problems that you are interested in, because one of the things that was really helpful for me about ED is that I was obsessed with it. I couldn't think about anything else. And so when I have a client, a lot of times I'm thinking about them for hours when I'm not in the session with them. And if you find things that problems that you're genuinely interested in solving, and you solve them in ways that are better than what exists, you won't have a problem. Because there's really two pieces of a business. One, you should solve, especially a coaching business, you should solve some kind of problem that people are willing to pay for. And then the other piece of it is that you have to learn to communicate why your way of solving the problem is better, and help those people understand that you can help them solve the problem. That's really what a business is. It's those two pieces. Have a good service that works, that is better in some way. It doesn't have to be the best that's ever existed, but it's better in some way than what exists, and communicate that effectively so that you can find the people who want that solution from you.
Totally. Yeah, that's really helpful. I like the reframe. Yeah. Problem space. Huh.
I think that's another reason, this is how I look at things. It's not the only way, but it's another reason to me why the niche is so important. Why having a specific problem, because you can communicate that. Cool. It's really hard to communicate. I can help you get your kids to stop wetting the bed, and I can help you fix your business problems, and I can help you do your taxes, and help you train your dog, and every problem you're running into, I can make your relationships better. If you have a lot of things that you're working on, it's really hard to write something that's going to get an emotional reaction from people who have all of those problems. But one problem you can communicate well.
That's good. Cool. Thanks to y'all for showing up. And I'm hoping we do many more.